question that you asked, and I'll tell you a couple of those as they come up. The biggest question that was asked, the one that was asked most often, and the one that is probably takes the longest to answer, is not a very surprising question. What's surprising is if the clicker doesn't work. Maybe I don't have it turned on. All right, there it is. That's it. No? No? No. Thank you. Can you just click to the first one? The next one? That one. How can I know that God exists? Now, here's the thing you got to know about this question. Number one, there's a lot about this answer that has to do with faith. And by faith, we know a lot about God, but a lot of it is faith. And yet, everything is about faith. See, what happens is that people say, well, you believe because of faith, we don't believe because of reason or because of science or because of this or that. But even that takes a tremendous amount of faith. Now, how do we know that we are breathing air? We're doing it, right? We presume that that's air that we're breathing. There's some faith. How do we know that there's going to be air to breathe in about 5 minutes? How do you know there's going to be air to breathe in 5 minutes? Well, we have faith that there's going to be, because the laws of nature have caused that to happen in the past, and yet we have to have faith. How do we have faith in what happened 200 years ago? You weren't there to see it. We have faith in those reports that happened. How do we have faith in something that, as scientists says, might have happened 15 billion years ago? Well, they weren't there, and they can do some hypothesis to get there, but they still have to believe it by faith. And so there's faith and there's reason. Now, here's the bottom line. When it comes to believing in God, there are three aspects that everybody lives under. Three. And it's true for you, it's true for me, it's true for everybody who believes in God, it's true for everybody who doesn't, and it's these three things. You have three things going on. You have the social aspect, and you have an intellectual aspect, and you have a personal aspect. And all three of those will coexist to allow you to believe that there is a God and that He is, and that He created you and He loved you, and that everything He is and knows is true. And for those who don't believe, there is a social aspect and an intellectual aspect and a personal aspect. It's true for all of us. By the way, it's true for almost everything in your life, that those three exist and coexist. So let's talk about those three. All right? First of all, there's a social aspect. Click to that next one. There it is. We tend to find most plausible the beliefs that are shared by people that you like, or you need, or you depend on, or you want to be around. Okay? We tend to believe those things. You get your group, your tribe, your people, and whatever they like, whatever they believe, whatever they kind of coalesce around, that's what you and I tend to navigate toward. Now, it can't be only that, but it is always a part of that. And so there was a question, for instance, that was asked. One of you asked this question. It's the next one, I think. What religion you identify with has a lot to do with where you were born. It's true. Most people in America are Christians, but most people in Pakistan follow Islam. How do we know that we wouldn't convert to Muslim if we went to an Islamic church long enough? Well, if you went long enough, you may convert to Islam. because of the social aspect. But there would still be an intellectual aspect. There would still be a personal aspect to that decision. All right? Now, it doesn't prove that God exists. It doesn't prove that Islam is right. It's just a fact of life and what we go through. So we have to identify with that. It doesn't prove it or disprove it, but it would be silly for us to say it has nothing to do with it. You think that works? All right, thanks. All right, sweet. Thank you, Phil. Can we give Phil a big hand? Phil Stambo, everybody. Okay, so, look, okay, I'm not going to say a lot more about that, except I'll say this. If you choose to hang out with people who don't believe in God, it can cause you doubt. Because all of your people are doubting or not believing, and therefore it will cause you doubt. Now, that's one side of that. The other side to that is even, in my opinion, even worse, and it's this. There are a lot of Christians, especially 6th, 7th, 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade. There are a lot of guys your age who go to church and you tend to identify as Christians because your parents do and your friends do and you've made some friends in church and everything's fine. And the social aspect promotes your belief. The challenge and the problem with that is that if everything we do is social and we don't have and explore the intellectual and the personal to go with it, it's not enough. So what I'm going to challenge you to do, it's great that we're here, by the way. It's great that we're here. But I'm going to challenge you to always explore the intellectual and the personal and not just hang on the social. Now, for me, most of my friends are Christians. All of my best friends are Christians. All the people that I hang around, my wife, my kids, and all my best friends are really deep spiritual people. And I have some friends that don't believe in God at all. That's okay. I just don't hang out with them 24/7. They're not my best friends. And the reason is because we have a real different core belief kind of system. So the social thing is there. It's fine. I'm just telling you, you can't hang your hat only on that one. You got to have all three. So let's move to the next one. When we deal with the intellectual, that's where a lot of people get hung up. And they really shouldn't get hung up. Here's why. I believe it takes more faith to not believe in God than it does to believe in God. I think it takes more faith, more blind trust to believe that God doesn't exist than to believe that He does exist. Now again, that's not proof of God, but it is an intellectual thought that we have to go through. And there are a lot of different aspects to where did all this begin? Where did we come? What is meaning in life? Why are we here? What is this about? Have you ever wondered that? Why am I here? What is life about? By the way, one of you asked that. I'm going to answer that question in either next week or the week after. What is life? But if you start asking that question, you begin to say, okay, how did the human race get here, and how did I get here? That's a core question. And so there are lots of philosophers and others who deal with lots of different issues. Now, I'm not going to go through all of them because most of them are boring and you don't care. I'll go through a few of them. For instance, where did everything begin? And some would say, the science would say, that Big Bang started. Everybody heard the Big Bang Theory? Almost everybody. All right. There's a Big Bang Theory that at some point in a very small, minuscule kind of way, a nuclear type reaction occurred, and from that, every part of the galaxy and every part of the the universe that you can imagine was formed, and over time, 1 billion or so years, 15 billion is kind of what they estimate, that over 15 billion years, we have formed into this thing. And if you do the science and back it up long enough, that's the only conclusion they can come to. And by the way, a lot of people believe that's it. And they say, we believe based on reason. You believe based on faith. And all I would say is, it takes a tremendous amount of faith to think that every galaxy, when you look up and see the stars at night, to think somehow it was all an accident. But more than that, it takes a tremendous amount of faith to think that Big Bang, that something happened out of nothing. That there was nothing, and then there was something. That takes, in my opinion, a huge leap of faith. I can't get there. So I want everybody to hold whatever's in your hand, release it from your hand. Just release. I want everybody to hold nothing. All right, everybody holding nothing? Good, I'm holding nothing. I'm holding nothing. All right? Now, imagine as you're holding that nothing, that if you held it long enough, that something would arrive in your hand that is holding nothing. And if I told you that if you kept your hand out for a couple of billion years, something would show up, you would have to believe that by faith. That's all I can say. That's all I can say. Now, it doesn't prove God, but what it does, it begins for us to realize that if something had to have started, it would have had to, well, here's the way. So there's this guy. His name is Francis Collins. Francis Collins is well known as perhaps the most influential scientist anywhere in the world. He right now heads the Human Genome Project. He controls more scientific dollars than any other scientist in the world. He is the most renowned scientist, and he was an atheist who began to think through all this stuff. And he wrote this really great book called The Language of God, because he came to understand a faith in God. He's a smart guy, right? And what he says this is what he says in that book. We have this very solid conclusion. The universe had an origin, the Big Bang. 15 billion years ago, the universe began with an unimaginably bright flash of energy from an infinitesimally small point. That implies that before that, there was nothing. And I can't imagine how nature, in this case the universe, could have created itself. And the very fact that the universe had a beginning implies that someone was able to begin it. And it seems to me that had to be something outside of nature. Now, again, it's not proof, but it's an intellectual thought that means that if you believe that there is no God, you've got to get past that and, by the way, a lot of other points, but I'm not going to go through all of them. Okay. Oh, the clicker quit working. Perfect. All right. So, then someone says, okay, wait a minute, what about the whole time thing? How do you get over the time issue? You're talking about billions of years, and yet at least the Bible history is about 6,000 or 7,000 years old. How do you get past that? And I don't know all the answers. Here's the only way that I personally can explain it. If you're in a field and there's nothing there, and God says, I'm going to create a tree in that field. Okay? There's nothing there, and God says, boom, there's a tree. Boom, there's a tree. Now, 10 seconds ago, there was no tree in the field, right? 15 seconds later, there's a tree in the field created by God. Okay? This tree right now, 23 seconds old. Right? Now, look at that tree. How old is the tree? It's about 40 seconds old. Right? If you look at that tree, does that tree look less than a minute old? No. If you cut that tree, I don't really. No, just forward it the next time. They're messing with me now. If you cut down the tree, you can actually count the rings and get a pretty clear understanding of how old the tree is, right? And so you cut down the tree, and some tree scientist somewhere looks at that tree and says, that tree is about 80 years old. Right? That tree is about 80 years old. Well, yeah, science would say that tree is 80 years old. How old is that tree? Yeah, it's like a minute 30. So when God created, go to keep going. Yeah. So when God, it's working. When God created that lion, on the day He said, "Hey, this would be a cool animal. Let me create a lion." Boom, there's a lion. How old is the lion? Like 5 seconds, right? Except you wouldn't look at that lion and say, "Well, that's a 5-second-old lion," because we know 5-second-old lions are little bitty cuddly babies, right? They're little baby lions who can't even stand up. But there's a fully grown lion that is about 10 seconds old. And that's true with everything He created. It's true with the sun and the stars and the moon and the grass and the trees and the stuff. And then He creates man and woman, right? And let's say when He creates them, they have the physical structure of a 20-year-old, but He's just created them. How old are they? Yeah, they're 90 seconds, they're 10 seconds old. So it's okay for us to understand that science says, look, 15 billion years ago this happened. And if you follow the age of the tree, sure, the tree's 80 years old. But the fact is, God can create the earth like this with mountains and rivers, and you look at that and go, man, how long did the water have to run down that mountain to create this kind of valley? Decade. It would. It'd take hundreds of years to create a valley, but God can create a valley like that. So whatever. Here's the thing. There's some intellectual thought. Now we could keep going. There's some. This may be too much, but whatever. I'm going to read anyway. We live in this intricate kind of world, and Collins says if you look at the perspective of a scientist at the universe, it looks as if it knew we were coming. There are 15 constants. The gravitational constant, various constants about the strong and weak nuclear forces. They have very precise values. Get this. If any one of those constants were off by even 1 part in a million, or in some cases 1 part in a million, the universe could not have actually come to the point where we see it. Matter would not have been able to coalesce. There would have been no galaxy, no stars, no planet, no people. We live in the force of nature that means that it doesn't get 180 degrees in the summer. That would kill us. It doesn't get minus 57 degrees in the winter. You can't live in the South Pole. Air is here, and we're able to breathe it. And all that is just to say that if God created a place where you and I as humanity could exist, He would do it in a perfect kind of way. Perfect kind of way. Otherwise, you're dealing with such improbability that you're sitting at a poker table, and you're the dealer. And someone's dealing out the hands, and then he deals his hands. And then everybody makes their bet, and the dealer lays down a royal flush. It's the perfect hand. And everybody goes, oh, man, how lucky. And then he deals again. And the next hand, everybody bets the next hand, he lays down another royal flush. And they go, whoa, what are the chances of that? And then the next hand, Everybody bets? Another royal flush. And he does it 20 times. He does it 30 times. He does it 40 times. He does it 60 times. He does it 80 times. And at some point, somebody says, wait a minute. You're cheating. You would think it the fifth time, the fourth, the third time, right? It's got to be. There's no way that can happen. That's the universe in which we live. There's no way it can happen accidentally. I believe it didn't happen accidentally. Intellectually, and I've looked at all of this, but intellectually, even Stephen Hawking said there had to have been someone who created this. I mean, it just can't happen. And he's certainly not he's not a believer. Okay, now, not only is that true scientifically, but let's just think through the whole concept of human rights. Okay, human rights. What is right and wrong? Helping out one another is for humanity's sake widely considered a right. Now, who has some candy? Hey, you got candy? What is that? Yeah, that's mine. Sorry, but I want it. I want it. Huh? That was wrong. That was wrong. It's inherently wrong. And I stuck my finger in it. Now I've actually ruined it, for the pot. No, it's not fine. It's not fine. It's not okay. I just stole your candy. It's not okay. There's nothing right about what just happened. Thank you. It was inherently wrong. And in fact, it was so inherently wrong. It was so inherently wrong. Does everybody agree that it was wrong for me to just take her candy? It was so wrong that what I'm going to do is I'm going to give her $20 for that candy. Now, is that right? Yeah, somebody says, no, give me the $20. Yeah, steal my candy, she said. Okay, here's the thing. I stole candy. We all went, wait a minute. You just stole her. Why would you think that? Okay, here's another thing. You not only heard about the Big Bang, but you've heard of something called natural selection. Anybody heard about that? The survival of the fittest. That the strong are always going to live over the weak. Always. And that's how we, as human beings, got here. That we were a stronger species than our ancestors, and we exist only because we are strong. Okay? We're able to survive. We're the fittest. Right? Now, I'm stronger than Isabella. I just stole her candy. But you all said, that's wrong. Why would you think that was wrong if survival of the fittest is correct? Why would we think that people deserve freedom and have rights? Why do we think that murder is wrong and that rape is wrong? Why do we think that abuse is wrong? Why do we think genocide is wrong? Why do we think that war is inherently bad? Why do we think that humans, when we hear of civilians in the Ukraine being bombed, why does our heart go out to that? Because of the empathy that we have as human beings. Now, if we were just a part of the natural world, there's not empathy in this. Okay? This is the lion who survives by eating the gazelle, or the bird that exists by eating the dragonfly. All right? Or the spider that exists by eating the thing that flies into its web. Okay? That's the natural kind of world. Now, intellectually, we have to get around the idea that if survival of the fittest is the way and the reason that we're here, there's an inherent problem with that. And the fact of the matter is that we inherently know it's a problem. For the rich to exploit the poor, for there to be racial differences. We get that that's a problem with humanity. We believe it's a problem because we were all created with dignity and with respect and with rights because we were created as something really important, not something that could just be taken advantage of. Thank you for that. I mean, I'd say thank you. You didn't give it to me. I stole it. It was very wrong. I bought it now. Yeah, now it's fine. I overpaid. You're exploiting. Okay. Here's the thing. Here's all I'm trying to say. Remember I showed you all those things? There's lots of debate that goes around this, but if you really think about these issues intellectually, you can realize that there is the overwhelming strong probability of a God who exists and did create us. It's not just a faith thing that we're living on. We live on faith, of course. I have faith in things I can't see. But I've done the intellectual exercise to believe that the fact that there is a higher power who created me with meaning and dignity and purpose is more probable, in my opinion, infinitely more probable than any of the other arguments against God. You'll have to explore that on your own, and I challenge you to have a fair explanation on how to do that. And then finally, there are personal reasons. I think it's the strongest myself. I think it's the strongest. And there are a lot of different categories. I put them in three. There are some who say, I just know. And there are others who said, I've seen. And then there's others who've said, I've been hurt. There are some people who just know that God is. They know it in their being. They know it. They've known it a long time, and they just know. And you say, well, I'm not that. Okay, that's fine. But there are some who just know. Jeremiah 31 actually says, this is a covenant I'll make with the people. I will put my law in their minds and write it on their hearts, and I will be their God, and they will be my people. And there are some that God just infuses from the beginning, I believe, but he just infuses this knowledge and this understanding. Now, here's what's tricky. The book of Romans says that God has shown himself to every human being. And that he either has or will show himself clearly to you too. Because here's what happens. When you reject God, you're not just rejecting a philosophical argument, you're rejecting the creator of the universe. I would advise you to not do that. But I'm a pastor, of course I would. There are some people who've said, I've seen, taste and see that the Lord is good. Some people have seen, man, they look out and they see a sunrise and they think, man, God, the beauty. I can't believe the beauty. How could that be an accident? Or you see the mountaintop, or you see the valley, or you see the look in someone's eyes that you just know is special, or you see the way that God has moved. And some of you have seen, and some of you will see God. For me, what I saw through God was the grace and mercy of God when I, one of your pastors, didn't deserve it. I didn't deserve it at all. There were some things that I did that were so atrocious. You would be horrified if you knew. How can a pastor do those kinds of things? You'd be horrified to know some of the things that I did early in life, before I really knew God. And when I didn't deserve it, I looked up and I realized that Jesus, a Savior, was there, and he loved me enough to redeem what I had done and to call me his own. It was a very personal acceptance into his family. I didn't deserve to be accepted. I just was accepted. And that's when I saw first. Others come to God because they've been hurt. And He is the one. Blessed is the man or the woman who takes refuge in Him. That when we hurt and we come to God, you're going to find peace like you can't find anywhere else. You're going to find understanding like you can't find it anywhere else. You're going to find safety like you can't find anywhere else. You're going to find a level of protection that you can't find even in the midst of the worst that you can imagine. You go to God and you realize somehow He's there. And there are some people who do the opposite, and their life falls apart, and they blame God, and they say, I don't believe in God because God could not let that happen to me. And all I would say to that is that if you understand the God story, you understand that there is good and there is evil that coexist in our world today. And if you turn against God for the evil that happens, you're blaming the wrong spiritual being. That it's not God's fault, it's the evil one's fault. And I would, look, we're all going to go through some rough spots, and some of you will go through, some of you are going through it today. And I'll be here to help you. I'll talk you through it. I'll do whatever I can. I'll pray for you. I'll do whatever I can. But I want to make sure you know that the evil one is alive and at work. Blame him. It's his fault that we live in a fallen, broken world of chaos and madness. And it's madness. Not the way God intended it. So, if you're going to believe in God, you're going to believe in Him because of social reasons and intellectual reasons and personal reasons. Now, while we're on the subject of God, here's another couple of questions. God knows past, present, future. Does He have free will if He knows all that He has done and will ever do? Okay, God knows what happened there, what's happening here, what will happen there. Does He have free will? Well, I don't know. I think He has free will, but is it free will if you know exactly where you're going to be 4 years from now? Probably. There's one little scripture that I like talking about prayer that says they change God's mind. So yeah, He knows what will happen in the future. You keep praying. You keep praying. About that thing that you wish, that you hope for in your heart, you just keep praying. Because God can change His mind. Change the future. You said, well, if He changed His mind, wouldn't He know that He was going to change? Yeah, He probably knew He was going to change His mind. You say, well, I can't understand that. Oh, really? Well, imagine a God so big that you can't understand everything about Him. That's our God. You're never going to understand everything about God. He's too big for you. Too big for me. And I study Him my whole life. He's too big. If God is omnipotent, which means He can do anything and He's all-powerful, but He can't sin, isn't that contradictory? Good question. The answer is no, it's not contradictory because of understanding what it means to be holy. And you and I, when we leave this life and go to heaven and we live with God forever, we will still have free will, but we won't sin. We will not sin. You and I won't sin. You say, well, how can that be? Well, because there won't be any pain there. There won't be any crying there. There won't be any bad there. Why? Because there won't be any sin there. If you don't go there, you're going to go to a place where there's nothing but sin. They won't be able to do any good there. It's why they call it hell, and we always think of it as, oh, it's going to be fire. And you know why it's going to be so awful? Because everybody who's there is just going to be selfishly doing their own thing forever. That's as bad as it can be. You can't get worse than to be in a room where everybody only has their own self-interest at heart. That's bad. If everybody's stealing, that's bad. So, the holiness keeps that from happening. All right, I got to stop. I wish I didn't, because the next one's really, really important. Human suffering. Why does He let us suffer? Why does He allow us to feel pain? We'll pick up there next Sunday morning. Fair enough? All right. So, middle school's going that way. High school's going that way. Ready? We don't have a lot of time, so let's go. Ready? Let's go. Okay, I'm supposed to do announcements in 5 minutes. Can you stand out there for 5 minutes?